Welcome back to the show. It's been a minute. I know. We were off for Thanksgiving, but we're back at it. This is Common Threads. We do this every Thursday here live from Brooklyn. 2 guests, 1 hour-ish, debating, finding common ground on all the top political hot button issues of the week. What does that even mean? Hot button issues of the week. Let us know, as always, what you think in the comments. And of course, like I said, we do this every Thursday. And today, we're joined not just by one guest who's been here before, but 2 returners. We got Reed Rasner. Reed is a former GOP candidate for U.S. Senate in the great state of Wyoming. Reed, I promised you last time I would visit. I have not been able to make it out there yet, but I promise you after the new year, I will do my best. And Antoine Seawright's also joined the show once again. He is the CEO of Blueprint Strategy, LLC, longtime Democratic strategist, a contributor to CBS News. Antoine, Reed, thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Good to be back.
Of course, awesome to have both of you. So, obviously the Hunter Biden pardon is where we're going to start today, just because it's not the newest of news, but it's the first time we've done a show since that news, and I actually think you're both perfect guests to weigh in on this. The newsy part of that story are now additional comments. People are looking to senior Democratic leaders to say, what are your thoughts on that? Is this okay? Are we in support of this? Former President Bill Clinton defended Biden. Bill Clinton said, I personally believe the president is almost certainly right. His son received completely different treatment than he would have if he hadn't been the president's son. Others say this is a dark mark on the Biden legacy. Antoine, I want to turn things over to you. How have you viewed this issue over the last few days? And what do you make of former President Clinton's voice of support?
I applaud the president for being a father. I think he did what any good father would have done, and that's be there for his son. At the end of the day, if Hunter Biden's last name was anything other than Biden, we would not even be having this conversation in the political ecosystem. But it is what it is. And the fact of the matter is, for Republicans who are criticizing the president's decision, keep in mind, you all ran a campaign on pardoning insurrectionists. Number 2, the president-elect is a convicted felon himself, not to mention he pardoned his son-in-law's father the last time he had the ability to pardon someone, and has now nominated this person to be the ambassador to France. For the Democratic leaders in Washington and the few outside of Washington who have not used their right to remain silent, keep in mind the American people demonstrate their expectations for us in the last election. They expect us to be in the fight. They expect us to take hard positions and be unapologetic about it. The Republicans for taking positions like Joe Biden took for his son, and they rewarded them in a handsome way in the last election. So don't get cute focusing on the conversation on K Street and forgetting about the voters on Main Street and my street where elections are and where they're won.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not going to disagree. The conversation on K Street gets outsized attention. Reed, but Antoine does bring up a good point. That's Charles Kushner. That's Jared Kushner's dad. I think he got, if I'm not mistaken, that was the pardon Trump gave. It was one of the 143 he gave his very last day, like his last few hours, which is not strange. A lot of outgoing presidents give that. Now putting Charles Kushner into that cushy type of ambassador role. Reed, what do you make of President Biden's pardoning of his own son? And keep in mind, you got some Republican senators. Coach Tuberville of Alabama said, hey, listen, I'd probably do the same thing.
Well, even Trump said, of course he's going to pardon him. But let's not forget that he said he wasn't going to pardon him. And if, to Anton's point, if his name was anything other than Biden, he'd be rotting in a prison cell, just like you or Anton, just like any of us. Let me finish. I give you your full time. This just goes to show the level of corruption that the Democrats are involved with, and the 2-tiered level of justice system that we live in. They can do anything and say anything, and they will get a full pardon, obviously. This is a sham. This is a scam, and it just goes to the corruption of the Biden regime. And again, if you or I did even a fraction of what Hunter Biden did or Joe Biden did or any of the Democrats, we would be rotting in a prison cell. So Main Street voters are affected. They see what's going on, and it's a complete sham. The only reason Democrats are coming to his defense now are to save face. It's disgusting. It's truly just an awful thing in America today. That's for sure.
Antoine, I'll let you pick it up.
Well, I think it's crazy as hell for you to talk to me or say in front in the conversation that includes me about two-tier justice system. Keep in mind, I'm Black. And so I've seen that justice system bend for some and break for people who look like me. There are people who are doing serious times for offenses that people who look like you, my dear friend, who are now chilling in their neighborhoods or with their families. There are people who are rotting in jail or doing time in jail and can never have access to this thing called the American dream because they've committed crimes less than people who don't look like them and pay deep and severe consequences. The only thing you can say that Joe Biden is guilty of is being a father. The fact of the matter is, you talk about rotting in prison. Hunter Biden, if his name was anything than Hunter Biden, would not be in prison because no one can name a person who's doing serious crime, who's doing serious time for some of the things that Hunter Biden was accused of, because they're not. That would have been settled in some sort of courtroom or even not in a courtroom, and the deal would have been done and the people would have moved on. But because he's Joe Biden's son, it's happening in the public sphere. Joe Biden has not done anything wrong. If he did, he would have been convicted of that a long time ago. At the end of the day, you say that Democrats are all these things. Keep in mind who the president-elect is, who the leaders of your party are, and some of the things that they have not been accused of but found guilty of in the court.
If Hunter Biden's name was anything other than
Biden was, if Donald
would
Trump
be
was
sitting in a
citizen,
prison cell.
Hold on 1 second. Reed, hold on 1 second. Antoine, go ahead and finish your thought, and I'll kick it back over to Reed for his response. Antoine, go ahead.
If Donald Trump was an everyday citizen, he would not see the light of day for the things he committed. But surely a convicted felon cannot work in the federal government. Better, sure as hell, cannot be in charge of the federal government. So I think the hypocrisy that you just mentioned speaks loudly about how non-convicted you guys have become on some of these things, and just living in reality. Just celebrate the fact that you won the election by grace.
Reed, go ahead.
Again, if Hunter Biden's name was anything other than Hunter Biden, he would be rotting in a prison cell. Gun trafficking, crack, the most despicable, disgusting sexual crimes we've ever seen on the Biden laptop.
What?
If there was even a fraction that you or I committed of those crimes, we would be rotting in a prison cell, regardless of skin color. It doesn't matter. You'd be rotting in a prison cell. Shame on Joe Biden. It just goes to show the corruption of the Democrats and the Democratic Party. And it's obvious to Main Street and Main Street voters that there's a two-tier justice system in this country, and it favors one party over another. And voters are waking up, and that is very obvious. Trump was elected with a mandate, and the mandate is set, and it's moving forward. We're going to restore justice in this country, and it will happen quickly, I bet.
Have you
A
seen
follow-up for Reed. Hold on. Antoine, give me 1 second, because I want to have Reed respond to something. Was it not the Biden Department of Justice that brought these charges against Hunter Biden?
And Joe Biden said he would not pardon him because he felt he was innocent. And here we are. He pardoned him back to 2014. Why would he do that?
So the scale and scope of the pardon is a fact. It absolutely is. It seems to be much more open-ended, and it leaves a ton of other questions, which also gets to another. I'm going to have Antoine respond to that, but I'd also love Antoine to weigh in on these reports of additional pardons, the Anthony Fauci's of the world. To me, that's the president sitting there saying, my God, who else? Not necessarily that those people he thinks have done things wrong, but that he knows that with an incoming Republican Congress, perhaps things get, in Biden's personal view, the president's view, these things get weaponized, more hearings. We're going to go after and target some of these individuals who made our lives much more difficult years ago. Maybe there's a kind of similar blanket pardon President Biden can give some of those other officials. But Antoine, back over to you. Thank you for your patience.
I think Reed should understand when he says sex crimes at Hunter Biden. Have you been watching the news here lately about some of the nominees being put up by the Republican president and even Donald Trump himself? So I don't think you want to open up that can of worms or have that conversation. But look, I think what's been crystal clear is the Republicans led by Donald Trump have indicated unapologetically that a couple things. One, they're going to pardon insurrectionists. Two, that they were going to political retribution was top of mind, top of the agenda. That includes going after folks who have tried to hold them accountable and do the right thing. And so I think it's smart for the president to be ahead of the curve and go to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is, as a good hockey player would do. And think about those who have served on the right side of history of the United States.
Reed, I actually got one final question on this topic for both of you. It's a little bit different, but Reed, I'm curious your thoughts.
Well,
Should Joe Biden pardon, Reed, hold on one second. Should Joe Biden pardon Donald Trump for the crimes that he's been accused of that still hang over his own personal criminal record?
Well, I don't even know that it matters because Donald Trump can pardon Donald Trump in just a matter of a few days if he wants. They're the president. We can debate this and argue about it at length, and we'll have the same conversation as soon as Donald Trump begins making pardons. I guarantee it. But back to the Hunter Biden laptop and his sex crimes. Show me a shred of evidence against the Brett Kavanaughs of the Republican Party that the Democrats have falsely accused of for years and years and years. We have an entire laptop the FBI won't even release to us, and I bet it gets released soon. The Democratic Party is corrupt. They're nasty, nasty people, and they are out for nothing more than political power and personal gain. And that's obvious to Main Street voters right here across the country. And I'm in flyover country. I've got a pretty good tone and my finger on the pulse here. I know how people are feeling, and it's laws for thee and laws for me. And they're a different set of laws for all of us. So it's shocking that you're willing to defend someone as corrupt and nasty as the Biden regime and Joe Biden and that family. What a shame. I'm sorry, but what a shame.
Well, keep in mind you are a modern day Republican, so that says everything about you if you want to go down that road.
Well, it goes both ways.
Right. We're not gonna get not that we are, but just as a fair warning shot, we're not gonna get needlessly personal. And I don't, me personally, granted, I'm not in Wyoming. I live in Queens, New York. Granted, I'm surrounded by lots of liberals and more Democratic voters. I personally don't think it's entirely fair to say, all the elected officials from this other party are so corrupt. They all want evil things, and it's only our party that does good, right? I mean, I think that's why we're trying to have good faith conversations to find common ground on a lot of these issues. To me, there's a lot of shared similarities, and yes, voters did overwhelmingly, pretty overwhelmingly, give the power back to the Republicans, but we know the way these things go. We could be having the same conversation 2 years from now saying, wow, what a mandate back the other way. We swung right back to the Democrats and gave them control of one or both chambers of Congress, because that's how this always goes, right? We got one party in power. Obama got famously shellacked in 2010. Trump got famously shellacked in 2018. And I don't know if that's going to happen a couple of years from now, but we could be right back having that conversation. To that point, for the president, soon to be, President-elect Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth vows he will continue to fight, in his words, for the defense secretary post. Antoine, it seems as if that's kind of falling apart right now. Now it kind of seems like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis might be the next pick. Give me your sense on how that has developed, or any other cabinet officials, because that is kind of the news of the moment. What will this new look administration actually look like?
These unserious nominees would not be able to apply for these jobs in the real world. Better yet, even be considered to be confirmed for these jobs. Resume matters, tone, past matters. Keep in mind, Neera Tanden was not confirmed because of old tweets. And if you see the accusations and you see the posture current from some of these people who've been nominated, it just shows you how big of a joke this process has become for very serious consequential roles. And Reed, I can't wait to hear your damn answer about some of these nominees, particularly when you hear Republicans say they want to run government like a business. No CEO in the world would hire Antoine or anybody else for the accusations alone. Better yet, some of the things that have come up in their past. Keep in mind, there were people who could not get confirmed in the Biden administration for old tweets, But I'll yield and let Reed defend the obvious undefendable that we've seen from these nominees.
Well, before Reed does that, I do want to remind, since you mentioned Neera Tanden, and we did do this on the show a couple weeks ago, Neera Tanden had to apologize for previous tweets calling Susan Collins the worst, comparing Ted Cruz to vampires, and using the nickname Moscow Mitch for Leader McConnell, and then comparing him to Lord Voldemort. And there's an advise and consent clause of the U.S. Senate And so the Senate gets to weigh in very clearly. Granted, had I called Mitch McConnell Lord Voldemort and then had to go to Mitch McConnell and say, please, sir, give me your vote so that I can lead the Office of Management and Budget, I'd probably be in a little bit of a sticky situation as well, to be fair.
But can I respond to that quickly?
Of course.
Seen the things that Donald Trump has said by some of these same Republican leaders? Have you seen some of the comments and the posts?
Of course, I get it. Trump accused Ted Cruz's dad of killing JFK. I got it. Like, I understand. It's been bizarro world.
Act as if words or tweets are somehow or another comparable to some of the foolishness and the serious things.
Okay, Reed, back over to you. Thank you for your patience. You've been waiting patiently. Reed, give me your sense on either the Hegseth nomination or how you see some of these others kind of moving on. Some Republican senators have been willing to be a bit more critical in their early assessment, and others have said, all right, maybe, we kind of wait and see what happens in the new year. And I don't think there's a clear path forward for all of them, but some, like Marco Rubio, obviously a clear path than others. Reed?
Sure. President Trump was sent to the White House with a mandate, the popular vote, the Electoral College vote. We have to let President Trump govern. It is time to let him govern. I trust his nominees, and I trust the Senate will do their job and their due diligence. The Democrats, if they continue with the mindset they're in today that is on display in full force here, I don't even have to say anything, they will only help the Republican Party more in 2 years. The House, the Senate, and the White House will remain in Republican control unless they get serious. That's a fact. Pete Hegseth, let him go through the confirmation process. Let them go through the Senate hearings, and let's see what is true and what is hearsay and what actually comes out, because we saw this with Brett Kavanaugh, and we saw this in Trump's first term where he wasn't even able to develop his full cabinet in his first 100 days like most presidents are allowed to do. The Democrats continue to wage political war on Republicans, especially on President Trump. It's Trump derangement syndrome. But he was sent to Washington with a mandate. The American people have spoken and said, let this man govern, let him lead the United States. And that is exactly what we need to do. I have the full faith of President Trump and his nominees, and I have the full faith of the Senate and the House to make the decisions for us and go through those confirmations and let the process unfold, and we can have the determination as the process unfolds. He hasn't even taken office yet. And we're having the debate on whether people even get to be nominated, and that's ridiculous. We did this to Brett Kavanaugh, and he still got through and got confirmed. Let the process unfold, and let's make America great again by filling his cabinet with amazing patriots. That's what I say.
Oh, come on, Reed. I appreciate you being here, man. But come on, if we're going to go with bumper sticker slogans here, man, come on. We're looking really little down. I'm going to call you out on that anytime. Let's make America great. I got it. I understand. And I don't mean disrespect. Antoine, final word on this topic before we move on. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things. It's the Senate, not the House, that confirms, that does advice and consent. Number two, when I mean unserious, look at Matt Gaetz, which ultimately withdrew his name. You look at Linda McMahon, who obviously has lied on the record about not even having a degree. You look at Tulsi Gabbard. You look at some of these nominees, and you have to ask yourself, is this the best we can do?
I don't know. I'm not in the United States Senate, and I don't get to confirm. I don't get to appoint these people. Let the process unfold. That's all I'm arguing for.
Okay.
And the Democrats are making
Reed, hold on a second. I promised Antoine here the final word. Go ahead, Antoine. Let's wrap it up.
You say let the process unfold, and the process is unfolding. A Republican Senate, and they have so far raised serious questions about the serious backgrounds of some of these nominees. And also, to that point, speaking of backgrounds, if I were applying for a job in the federal government, you know what will be required? FBI background check. You know what has not been required by some of these nominees? An FBI background check. Why? Because the serious backgrounds in most of these nominees would raise the questions, and no way in hell would they be confirmed regardless of the politics, because the institution of the Senate will live on past the presidency of Donald Trump.
All right, so we got to move on to the next topic here. But here's my thing. First thing, I don't mean to like ding both of you here, but that's kind of my role here. I'm trying to call both and strikes best I can. Antoine makes it. Hey, here we go. Was that? I heard that. That was great. Antoine brings up a point about Tulsi Gabbard. I get it. Representative Gabbard, of course, was also one of the leading Democrats for president just a few years ago. Wasn't that much, right? I understand a lot of Democratic concern about Representative Gabbard's place in the upcoming administration. She was right there on the debate stage with then Senator Kamala Harris. We all remember that a few years ago. And a lot of Democrats are like, hey, we're going to support the Gabbard campaign. Reed, my concern with you and kind of, not with you personally by any means, but, with the idea of chipping away in advice and consent is that, we've gotten into the slippery slope of judicial nominees and doing away with the filibuster. And it's all well and good when you're the imminent party in power. But what happens once we get that swing right back a few election cycles later and you're like, man, we've weakened the Senate's role, constitutionally granted role of advice and consent, and let the president be whoever it wants. And I don't know that Republicans, Reed, would be just as inclined 4 years from now to say, man, President-elect Pete Buttigieg, let him do whatever he wants, and the Senate doesn't really get much of a say. But we have to leave the debate there, which teases for the next time we're going to have you guys back on. And we do want to talk about term limits, because this is the big one. I think we're going to have some common ground here. I'm praying. I'm hoping we are. North Carolina lawmakers this week passed a resolution in support of congressional term limits, ironically, not for themselves, but for members of Congress. A Pew survey from July of 2023 found 87% of American voters said they were in favor of limiting the number of terms that members of Congress can serve. Reed, over to you. Is it time, at long last, as someone who ran for Congress, is it time, and a young guy at that, the way you are, Reed, is this finally time we take this up?
Yeah, 100%. It was one of my top platform positions that I took while I was running for United States Senate. Term limits are essential. I campaigned on 3 terms in the House, 2 terms in the Senate. The days of the career corrupt politicians are over, and it is time for the American people to regain control of this country. Term limits are imperative. We had Dianne Feinstein, I think, die on the Senate floor. People were raising her hand to vote for her. It is just a terrible, terrible shame what is going on in this country. We need term limits 100%.
Antoine, I'm curious your thoughts. Antoine, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it's fair to say that you've worked for or alongside people like Jim Clyburn, obviously a legend of the modern Democratic Party. But whether it's Whip Clyburn or any of these other leaders, the Steny Hoyerses or the Maxine Waters, the Chuck Grassleys of the world, what are your thoughts here as a Dem strategist, Antoine?
Reed, I think you should apologize for your reckless language about Senator Feinstein and her service to this country. I think that was just inappropriate. You could have said she could have retired, but your language was reckless. So let me just say that. Secondly, I think that there are term limits every time voters go to the ballot box. And the voters know how old their elected officials are, and they know what they've done or not. And that should not be a government thing because a few people with votes decided. I think that's up to the people. And that's the beauty about this country. People decide their elected leaders, no matter how old or young they are. Because I don't want someone coming along one day to say you're too young to serve, even if certain offices require age limits or age requirements. And so I think voters should ultimately decide that. If you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat and you believe that, you can term limit yourself. I've seen people do that. In my home state, there have been local officials, South Carolina, who term limit themselves in elected office, and they've left the office. But many of them who committed to term limits, what happens? They stay in office. And just because you stay in office does not mean you're corrupt.
Okay, fair enough. Reed, give me your thoughts about how realistic would this be to pass? It's interesting because the North Carolina law, like I said, wouldn't apply to them at the state level in North Carolina. They're trying to do this for members of Congress at the federal level. There's also talk about making this a constitutional amendment. We understand the uphill battle, how historically rare that is. But Reed, give me your sense. Is this something that, could kind of pick up any steam or not really? Because it would kind of require Congress itself to regulate itself.
Well, it'll pick up steam as soon as we elect a Congress and a Senate that will allow it to happen, which we didn't do this last election, although the Republicans did take majority in the House and the Senate. There isn't enough of them that support term limits, unfortunately. But when we start electing new people and the old guard gets out, the career establishment gets out, we will get term limits. It'll be a constitutional amendment, and it's over 80%, you said it earlier, I don't know the exact number, over 87% in favor of Americans in favor of term limits. 80% are Democrat, and I believe 90% are Republicans in favor of term limits. And you just follow the money when you don't have that NDCC or NDSC money flowing into your into your companies, maybe your tune would change, because term limits are a good thing for the American people 100%, and the corruption will end when we get term limits.
Who ultimately thinks that the voters will ultimately, every voter wants this? Because if every voter wanted this, we would have this by now. The same voters who rejected your bid to the United States Senate are the same ones who decide whether or not their politicians continue to serve or not serve, depending on not age or any other thing that exists.
87% of Americans want term limits, Anton. What I'm saying is follow the money, and that's why your position is what it is. You are probably deep down in your heart, you're for term limits. Let's be honest. Follow the money, and we have the real reason why you're against term limits, because you serve your people in Washington, D.C., and a bunch of money comes from the NDCC and the NDSC.
Reed, I
don't know about that type of accusation based off nothing, Reed, to be fair. But Antoine, I think my more direct question. Hold on, gentlemen. I think my question more directly for Antoine is, Antoine, I understand that you yourself, you're not an elected official, but I would still look at you, and I've watched you on CBS and other places for years, and I say, man, Antoine is a young rising star of Democratic Party, either policy or media placement, whatever it is. Antoine, I'm sure you've had to be frustrated at times with all due respect to the legacies and the lives led by these people, but the Ruth Bader Ginsburgs of the world not stepping aside. I understand that's a Supreme Court term limit, different conversation, but there have been a lot of proposals to limit terms for the Supreme Court to 18 years. Frustrations with Ginsburg not stepping aside, frustrations with the Bidens of the world not stepping aside. I mean, Antoine, I think it's great that finally we got someone like a Hakeem Jeffries in a leadership position, but that only came because he had to earn the blessing of a Nancy Pelosi, of a Steny Hoyer, of a lot of these other leading Democrats who were, again, respectfully, far up there in age and perhaps therefore out of touch with people in our age range.
Well, first of all, I think it's bullshit what Reed said about following the money. There's nothing corrupt about Antoine Seawright, and I think it's disrespectful for you to even launch that kind of accusation towards me. I worked my ass off to get to where I am, so I don't need you from your seat of privilege trying to insinuate anything about me. That's number one. And number two, Hakeem Jeffries is in the position he's in because Jim Clyburn, Nancy Pelosi, and Steny Hoyer stepped aside to be where they are. That leadership inside a caucus is different than leadership inside the Congress or elected representation. Elected representation means the voters ultimately decide how young or not so young they want their leaders to be, and they will do that the same way that the voters in Florida decide that Maxwell Frost should be the youngest person ever elected to Congress, the first Gen Zer, in the same way that I think Grassley's 91 years old, and the voters sent him back to Congress. And I'm thankful for the strong, wide shoulders and support of a legendary Jim Clyburn, because no one will be able to deliver for South Carolina, not just for Democrats, not just for his district, not just, quite frankly, for our state, but for the country in the way that way that Jim Clyburn has done. And you don't do that by being there for 2 or 3 terms. You do that by learning the institution, learning the ways of the institution, and accumulating respect so that you can deliver for the constituents and for the people who sent you there.
And I'll give Reed the last word on this one, because I did that for Antoine the last time. And I will say, perhaps in furtherance of Antoine's point, that maybe the reason Biden was successful. I know Reed's going to say, well, Bidenomics was a mess, but he still passed 4, incredibly large pieces of legislation, 2 bipartisan, 2 on party lines. He doesn't get the CHIPS and Science Act or the bipartisan infrastructure bill done, probably if he doesn't have his decades of Senate experience, if he's not chummy and have these personal relationships with Republican Senate votes that he really needed. I say that in agreement with what Antoine said. Like, there is something to be said, of course, for having these senior Democratic officials, have these years and these decades under their belt to help grease the runway of being able to actually affect change. Because Biden did pass a lot more legislation than we actually see presidents usually get. But Reed, final word back to you.
I will just leave it at 87% of Americans, the people in Washington, they assumably represent, want term limit. 87%. It is a shocking number of how many Americans want it. And it's a simple floor vote in the House and the Senate to get it in a ballot and let the American people decide. Why wouldn't we give the American people that opportunity?
Yeah, we didn't get to debate it this time, but the congressional stock trading conversation, that's a different one, but that also requires the members of Congress to kind of regulate themselves after Den Crenshaw's kind of head-scratching comments on it last week. All right, we're near the end of the show. Reed and Antoine, we got hot and heavy again. Like, we caution here. We don't do personal attacks, and I do appreciate you both kind of self-regulating that. That's how we roll here, and I want to be as out of the conversation when I need to be from time to time. But what is foundational to the show is the belief that there's got to be something nice about the other side, even a personal thing. And so, Antoine, I'm going to give Antoine the final word on this one. So, Reed, first to you. Obviously, Reed, I know as a Republican, I know you're thrilled with the election outcome for the most part. But I'm encouraging you here, Reed. You remember how this goes. Say something nice about the Democrats, about either the party officials who are there, about their voters, about their policies. And please, I'm going to encourage both of you to try to refrain from then getting kind of needlessly divisive or personal or partisan. Reed, say something nice about the other side.
Well, it's so nice to see so many Democrats come to the Republican mega side and support President Trump with his new tariffs and his nominees and everything that's going on here. So we do get some, even Gavin Newsom came out and against Joe Biden and with the Republicans recently for his pardons. So there is some unity there, and we can have unity again. I do believe the American people are ready for some unity. So Democrats and Republicans alike want unity, and President Trump can bring that leadership for unity, I think.
Reed, I never push for a follow-up in this segment, but I'm going to push for a follow-up because I think you did make a very intentional comment earlier in the show. You cast all Democratic officials with this broad brush that I was quick to call you out on because I disagree. And I think we get needlessly personal here. But it sounds like to me the positive thing is like, oh, some Democrats now agree with us.
Well, Democratic voters. I will never disparage my fellow Americans. Their leaders are another thing, and I will certainly say that. But Democratic voters definitely want unity. America is ready for unity, and people want to come together. Democrats and Republicans alike, and I get to talk to them daily, and that's a very fortunate thing in my life.
Antoine, finally over to you. I know this is not the election outcome Democrats really want. Is there anything about incoming Trump administration policy proposals or conversation that make you say, yeah, you know what, I may not agree overall, but at least there is this type of thing. And that is pretty positive for everyone involved, Antoine.
Well, I'm glad that they're no longer eating the geese and cats in Springfield, Ohio, that we heard during the election. And I'm thankful that all those illegal votes that were talked about or were going to take place during the election from the Republican side, that those did not happen because they happened to win the election. So I'm thankful that some of the rhetoric that we heard during the course of the election is no longer topics of discussion. And I'm also thankful that you will have some Republican senators with the steel spine and the will to reject some of these extreme nominees who would not even be qualified to apply for some of these jobs in the real world.
We did our best with that segment. I know it's after the show we've had. It's like I'm not going to get both of you, but here's what we're going to do. The day's going to come. The three of us are going to get together. We're going to have a drink or a lemonade or something, and we're going to talk this out in person, and it's going to be great. And I look forward to that, and I look forward to the furtherance of conversations that we've had. That is my special guest, once again, for taking the time to join us for a second show. Reed Rasner, former GOP candidate for U.S. Senate from the beautiful state of Wyoming, and Antoine Seawright, CEO of Blueprint Strategy, LLC, longtime Democratic strategist. Antoine, Reed, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, folks, and that brings it back to me. Wow, you know what? Listen, you never know what you're going to get for a show, right? Especially for guests, Taylor, that we've had before to kind of come in, but I like that. I think it's, listen, we're in new territory here. We're after Thanksgiving. The electoral dust is still settling. Took us a while to figure out. They counted votes in California for far too long, but it finally seems like we got a sense on where we're going here. And I think the new realities of this new incoming administration are going to continue to work their way in. And in the meantime, yeah, man, I mean, it's these picks for cabinet that are obviously going to take up a lot of the energy, soak up a lot of the oxygen between now and a while. What do you think?
Yeah, I think what really needs to be addressed is how much the Trump transition team is vetting these candidates. and how much time they're actually spending looking into their backgrounds. And I bet you a couple of these are landmines that they didn't see coming.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always a big thing, I feel like. That was a famous West Wing storyline. There was a pick for the Supreme Court, and he's like advancing through the process and like, wait a minute, Judge, did you write this paper at Princeton 30 years ago where you once wrote this? He's like, I was 22 years old. What are you doing? He's like, that's going to tank your entire nomination. What a simpler time of American political history that was. And that was fake American political history. And you still look at it. We compare everything to the West Wing, although everyone in D.C. tells you life on Capitol Hill is actually not like the West Wing at all, but it is very much like the show Veep.
Is Canada going to become our 51st state? I think we have.
Do we have sound from that? Yeah, let's tackle this one solo. All right, this is Pete Ducey with a report from what happened from the meeting at Mar-a-Lago between Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and President-elect Donald Trump. I have not been able to stop thinking about this. Take a look.
We're getting some new details about that Trump-Trudeau dinner from two people who were at the table with them. We are told that when Trudeau mentioned to Trump new tariffs could kill the Canadian economy, Trump, the president-elect, joked back to him that if Canada cannot survive without ripping off the United States to the tune of $100 billion a year, then maybe Canada should become the 51st state and Trudeau could be its governor.
Governor Trudeau, the 51st state. You know, obviously it's a big joking thing, but it led to more of a serious conversation this week than you would think. And this is my great take, Taylor and Dan, and there's no way to prove it. I think if you're an American president, there's probably no greater notable legacy than expanding the map, adding a state, taking over a territory and making it part of the U.S., that's part of your dogma and doctrine and legacy forever. And we've seen this with Trump. He played around with this in 2019, the idea of like buying Greenland. And I think this kind of like kicks around in the back of his mind a little bit from time to time of like, wait, I know I'm joking. Remember this? I promise not to do this to Greenland, he said on Twitter with, God, look at that hotel. That is actually, that's the Trump Hotel in Vegas. And I was just drop it in there to Greenland. So I think it's, I would love to be a fly on the wall and know how Trudeau acted. But I feel like, we joke about this, but there's something, I want to say sinister. There's something more serious under the surface. And we're going to come back to this conversation in the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think one thing about him is he cares about his family legacy.
Yeah.
And land expansion is a really, like you said, hasn't happened in our lifetime among any of our presidents. So it's when you brought that up, I was like, holy wow, I can actually see that happening in the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think your conversation's got to start with statehood for Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. Because I feel like that's like the long-running conversation we've been having for quite some time. Although my take for D.C. statehood is I feel like it makes more sense to just make it the 9th Congressional District of Maryland. And then it still operates as a federal city. They have representation. Eleanor Holmes Norton has been the non-voting member of the House. She just gets a vote. Your two Maryland senators represent the 700. It's the size of a congressional district. The population of D.C. is like 800,000 people. And if you look at the original map of D.C., it was like Virginia gave a chunk and Maryland gave a chunk. And then Virginia took its land back at some point, retrocession. So to me, it's like the solution for D.C. statehood, may not be to like make it its own state, but you can still give the rights of enfranchisement to the people there by making it part of Maryland. I don't know. Every time I say this, people shoot me down. I'm like in the minority about it, but I've cooked on this for a long time. It's like I've thinking about these. Anyway, so Trump making something a 51st state. We're gonna have that. We're gonna come back to this a lot.
What about Haiti? It's delved into a bit of chaos and
Yes.
strategic location in Cuba where Russia has military supply.
Right. Haiti. Wow, hadn't heard that one. But no, that's good. What are we looking at here now? A map. Also, I'm really curious. So this is. I don't know if this is Taylor or Dan's map, but I am noticing the hearts and the safe places all throughout Florida. So I produced a show with all Floridians here. This is definitely part of what we're looking at right now. Cha-ching, definitely part of the United States for sure. Oh, Delray Beach, beautiful this time of year, wasn't it? Yeah.
Opportunities.
Beautiful every time of year. Opportunities. I feel like it is. Not so much here. It's very cold here. So now's a great time of year to go down to Delray Beach. So I don't know, man. I mean, I think a lot of these this kind of gets to the bigger Trump thing we used to talk about. Of like, how much do you take do you take him seriously or do you take his policy proposals literally? Of like, yes, Yes, you know what? He's going to come out. It's like, maybe it should be. We're going to make Canada the 51st state. Canada's map is wild to me because the population is like this and the land expanse is like this. There's just like nothing up there north of the people.
There's 90% of them, I think, live within like 100 miles of the border.
Yeah.
90% of the population.
All right down there. The rest of it's just hockey rinks,
Exactly.
which that tournament's going to be really cool. It's not called that Frozen Four thing, that National Cup in February.
Four Nations.
Four Nations,
Yeah.
pardon me. Yeah. US, Canada, Finland, and Sweden.
Yeah,
That's going to be awesome. We're going to do some special common threads, hockey adjacent.
We're gonna stream some Chell and put that on there.
Yes, we are. Some Chell, that's what you call it? Some
We got
NHL, some
Chell.
Chell?
Right there.
I love that right there. All right, that was an awesome show. One more time, special thanks to our guests, Reed Rasner and Antoine Seawright, Taylor and Japan Dan here in the studio. Folks, that's going to do it. Is it time to do it? What's my favorite fruit? It's pineapple. That's right. It's time to go get some pineapple after the show, folks. We do this every Thursday here for Brooklyn Common Threads on all these platforms listed below. Good talk. See you next week.